Hello, welcome to this Start Deliver webinar. I'm Johan Nilsson. I'm CEO and founder of Start Deliver and as well Impact Academy. So Start Deliver, we make a customer success platform, and Impact Academy, that's our training academy for customer success. So we are a customer success company. Great that you can join, or if you're listening to the recording, happy to have you. This will be recorded and you will get a copy of this. You will also get a copy of the presentation material if you want. So don't worry about that. We're going to do this for roughly 30 minutes, this webinar, and we're going to cover a few very important things around onboarding. This webinar is called 5 Fresh Ideas to Dust Off Your Customer Onboarding. I think you're never done with the onboarding process, and I want to share a few things that we've learned by working with hundreds of companies with onboarding. So that's the agenda for today. So we want to bring some new ideas. Maybe you are already doing them, so great, but hopefully we can bring some new things to the table for you. So let's see, what is onboarding? Let's start there. What is onboarding? And I think we should bring that all the way back to sales, actually. So when sales work through their pipeline, when they bring in a new customer, that's where onboarding starts. But if we take one step back here, anyone who's been working in sales are familiar with this, but of course they work through leads. They have some prospects, maybe they do a trial, and they win a deal, basically. They close the customer, they sign up for our service, and that's where the onboarding usually starts. Sometimes if you have a trial or if you have a proof of concept, the onboarding might even start before the deal is done, basically. And in general, this journey before one deal is a lot of discussion going on, and the customer explains their problems. We dig deeper into that. We find a solution. So, of course, this can vary depending on your sales process, but there's a lot of things going on before they sign up, usually. And that's an important thing. We'll come back to that later. And if we move sides, so this is the sales side, usually, and we move sides, so we get into the customer success side of things, and where the onboarding usually looks like. So usually you have a handover, you have some setup, you have some training, and then you launch. So this is a quite common onboarding steps. And this is also usually a new person, right? So usually the sales rep hands over, and then the new process starts with onboarding. And this is where we're going to focus today, and this is where we're going to dig into. And what about this? Is this fine? Or do we have any problems here? And of course, this is where a lot of things can go wrong. And that's why we want to address this. And I want to highlight a few things to start off with. If these are some common symptoms, if you have less than optimal onboarding. Number one here is that you have very long projects. So basically the projects never end. So you keep doing these onboardings and they run forever. And in some companies that can mean months, in some companies that can be years, some companies that can be weeks. But you have long projects, that's a sign of things are not going very well. Another common symptom of a non-functioning onboarding is there is a lot of frustration internally. Things are not getting done. We are late. It's not working properly internally. And it can be from management perspective. It can be other people. It can be tech involved. So there can be a lot of frustration internally with onboarding projects. Even worse, you can have the customer being frustrated. And maybe you get some angry emails. Why are we not up and running? What's missing, why we should have been done already. So that can also be a symptom on things not going very well. What this can symptoms of also poor onboarding is that we have customers that churn year one. Can be other reasons, but a lot of time, an onboarding project that's not running very well will end up in a customer churning. It can also, as the second point here, it can also mean that they are not adopting the platform as we want, as they have potential to do. And down the road, this will mean missed expansion. It can also mean contraction. So the customer basically reducing their number of users or their plan with us. So both these last two are really going to hit us in a net revenue retention perspective. So onboarding, it's a project, but it's also a lot about setting up the customer in the right way into our company, into our service. And as all of us know, if we do this right, customers stay for a very long time. So that's why this is such an important area. And what are the root causes to these symptoms? And there is a few that I want to mention right now before we get into these 5 things that we want to recommend to you. First of all, there is a lack of a process for the onboarding. Basically, we mentioned earlier these steps after the one deal. You have the handover. Hopefully you do the handover. We'll come back to that. You have the setup part, you have the training part, and you have the launch part. That's on a very high level, these steps. But there's a lot that needs to happen between those steps. And there's also a lot of things that are not technical. It's not an admin, which is usually the things that we miss. We might do those things in a good way, but we miss a lot of other things. So the process is not what it should be. The second part here is that we underestimate what needs to happen on the customer side. And this is something we're going to talk about later here. There's a lot we want to do usually a lot of things the customer needs to do to make this a success. And that's usually a gap in our process. And the last part here is that we don't measure this enough. We measure a lot usually, but we miss measuring onboarding as a process. And of course, if you don't measure it, it's hard to improve. It's also hard to understand where we might miss out. So these are the underlying issues. We can't cover all these. We do that at Impact Academy. We have a specific program for onboarding to create your onboarding playbook, basically. But I will highlight a few things that I think are key and that really can help you, and you can actually start doing immediately if you want. So that's the point, the main thing today. And let's dig into the first one here. So 5 fresh ideas. Let's start with number 1. The number 1 thing here is that we need to repeat the goal. The goal, we easily miss the goal. And what do we mean by the goal? The goal here is the customer's goal, of course. Our goal might be just to get the customer in, but the customer has a business goal, why they bought our product. And the goal is really important. And to define the goal, so we make that clear, a goal consists of 2 things, an objective and a time frame. And it's very important to have the time frame. And that's usually the thing we miss or forget about or don't pay attention to. So that sounds great in theory, but what do we really mean here? So I want to share a few examples. And if we have a sales app, that's our tool, that's our service. A customer's goal can be that they want to create 2 million euro in new pipeline by the second quarter. That's a clear objective and a timeline. So that's just an example. Another example, maybe we are selling an HR app, that's our product. And the customer here, in this case, they want to get insights from a pulse survey to all employees by the end of the year. End of the year is a clear timeline. Get insights, it's not as clear, but they want to send out a pulse at least to all the employees. So that's a clear objective. And the third example of how a goal can look like. This is an email app. It can be email marketing function tool or a system. And they want to get 600 attendees to an event in May. So May is the timeline, of course, and the objective is these 600 attendees. These are a few examples, and they are quite concrete. I know you don't always get that concrete answer, so you don't have that. And I think one of the most common things we get asked, but what if we don't have the goal of the customer? And I think this is a great question to ask, because it's quite often we don't have it when we take over from sales. So in this case, we should, of course, go back and ask sales. But sometimes sales doesn't even have this information. They probably discussed this, so you can probably get some ideas and some clues. But what do? We got some clues. They think they want to do this. They want to save money. They want to grow. They want to be more efficient. So if we don't have it, we need to get closer to this when we start onboarding. So I understood from that you're looking to grow sales. Can you explain that a little bit more to me? So we need to do what we call goal discovery. So it's really important, if you don't have the goal, and if that hasn't been picked up by sales, then we need to do goal discovery to understand this goal. Because it's very important to keep the goal top of mind during the onboarding process. That's going to help us to drive the project faster. It's going to help us to keep the sense of urgency high. One of the reasons that projects are delayed and go late is that we lose this sense of urgency. So that's such a key thing to keep during onboarding, is to focus on this goal. And it makes the project much more exciting also for the customer, which is really important. So that was the number one. Let's get into number two. It's very linked to number one, actually. We talked about it already. Handover. We need to formalize the handover. That's the number two here. And we need to extend it. So if you do handover, awesome. That's great. You should do that. Are you doing it in a formalized way? If you don't, that's our recommendation. Start doing it in a formalized way. And maybe you are missing a few things in the handover. The typical handover is like very technical and more from an admin perspective. How many users? What are the setup? Which data? What files? Whatever. There's usually a technical aspect to onboarding where you basically you want to bring in some information so you can kick off the project and get things going. It's more around these things, and that's great. I mean, that's, of course, you should have that as well. But what's usually missing is what we talked about just earlier: goal. What is the goal here? And not in a very general term. We need an objective. We need a time frame. So that's one thing to add. Another thing that is very common that we kind of don't pick up is the risk. And what we mean with risk here is what is the risk that this customer will somehow fall out, or we will not get things going. So that the risk this varies, of course, with the type of business we're in and the type of customers we have. But the risk can be anything from technical part, or a person, or expectations. There's usually a lot of risks that sales know, but if they haven't been prompted to tell us, we will not get those things. So very important to pick up on the risks. And the way you do this is by asking this very specifically, prompting the sales rep to reply on these things, because they have the knowledge, they know this, and they usually want to share this. But if you just ask an open question, they will probably forget to tell you. So that's why you need to formalize this. Risk is very important. Another very important part is potential as well. I've seen so many times that we forget about the potential of the customer. Maybe they started up with a small team. We know they can expand to the bigger team. We know they can go into other markets or subsidiaries. We know they want the bigger plan eventually. All these things are discussed in the sales process, and we need to have those with us. Those are key things to make sure that we not only onboard a customer, but we also set them up for the next step to expand and grow with us. The last thing here we call AX, that's appropriate experience. So basically, how does this customer want to interact with us? Are they really tech savvy, or are they very mature users of a platform, or are they beginners? Do they want a lot of close interactions with us, in-person meetings, or do they prefer more another interaction type, basically? So appropriate experience, you need to carve that out a little bit, what that means for you and your customers. But that's basically the softer things on how they prefer to work with us, and very important part of making them successful. So these are things that you typically miss in your if you do onboarding, or sorry, if you do handovers. Most companies and most customer success teams have handovers, but you can probably refine them quite a lot and that will help them a lot in this process. So these are a few things. Here are a few examples on how to make the handovers formalized. So the first example, the form. So it's not as sexy, but it's very effective. Use the form, make it prompt the sales rep or the account executive that closed the account, that won the customer, and make it easy for them to fill it out. That's the key here. And if you want to, depending on the type of business you're in, maybe the sales manager even will follow up and make sure that this has been done after a closed deal, and maybe they won't get their quota, or sorry, will not get their bonus unless they fill out this form. So you can enforce this in different ways, of course. Another way to do it is by using async video. So sometimes it's easier for the sales rep to record this. Of course, some data you probably want as a form, but maybe some things you prefer to get verbally. And you can have a meeting for that, of course, but you can also do this as in a async video to streamline things and make it easier to document as well going forward. So a few examples on how to formalize it in a simple way. Super. So we're into number 3 here. And number 3 we call joint accountability. And joint accountability is managing expectations, and more importantly, understanding that we're in this together with the customer. We usually understand that, but how do we communicate that to the customer, and how do we get them to understand this? And quite often, there will be a situation where the customer expects things to maybe run easier than they actually are. And that can be both that they haven't listened to the sales rep explaining how the process will go, but it can also be that this hasn't been discussed in detail during the sales process. So this is where it's a little bit a rough awakening sometimes for the customer. And we need to be aware of that. And it's a very critical part to get them to understand how important it is that they do their part here. Because we can only do so much from our side as well. A few things here. So we usually are quite good on setting up things in our account, in their account, in our product. We know that quite well. We know quite well what we can do from our side. But what's overlooked in many cases is the things the customer needs to do outside of their product, or of our product. So basically, they need to export data from another tool. They need to open up an API on their side. They need to define some things on their side for some part of their business. There's a lot of things that we depend on they doing on their side. So those are great things to map out, to be clear on. You can do this very easily in a quick workshop with the team. What are the things the customer needs to do on their side outside of the product? And those are critical things usually. And those are the things that make projects stall, and those are the things that fall between shares. And here we really need to invoke joint accountability. And what we mean here also with joint accountability is that usually stakeholders that were heavily involved in the sales process somehow remove themselves out of the project. Maybe this was a C-level person signing off for this contract. They are head of this division, but now they have delegated the onboarding to other people. Very common. So people change on our side. Usually it's customer success doing the onboarding, but people change on the customer side. And that's a really sensitive part here as well. And we need to keep the stakeholders, the people who are owning this from a business perspective, involved in the project. That's really crucial. Usually, that's also one part of if we have problems with onboarding, is that they remove themselves and we let them remove themselves. So how can we do this? And this is, in most cases, it's a communication problem. We are not communicating enough, and also the customer is not communicating enough internally. A way to do this in a much more efficient way is to work with a shared workspace. This is an example from Start Deliver, where you can invite your customer to a shared space. You can set up the timeline for the project. You can hand out tasks. These are the things needed to be done on both sides. And very importantly, you can invite the stakeholder. So the stakeholder on the customer side, they can see what's going on. They can see where we're behind. And in most cases, it will be on their side. They are not doing all the things that are on their side. And it's a great way to keep the communication tight. They will get updated when things change. They can comment. You can share files. You can share inspiration. So this is an example, but collaboration and communication is really key for joint accountability. This is a way to do it through Start Deliver. There's, of course, other ways to do it, but get away from this email back and forth and make this visible, clear for everyone. That will help you a lot through onboarding. So that was number 3, joint accountability. Number 4 here is measure. I talked about this already in the beginning. We don't measure enough onboarding. That's the general thing of how it usually is. And we measure a lot, but measure onboarding. I will share a few examples. First of all, we talked about, in the beginning, we talked about this process where we basically have the handover, we have the setup, we have the training and the launch. Are we done? No, the customer is not onboarded until they have started getting value. Time to first value is one way to measure it. Basically, this can vary, of course, depending on products. But when does the customer actually start getting some value from the product? And it can be usage. They have started using the platform. In the email marketing example earlier, maybe they've started getting some signups for the event. They have started sending emails. In the CRM example earlier, maybe they have started creating some opportunities. In the HR app example, they have started sending out the polls to a few employees. Whatever these first steps are, you need to measure those. And that's when we have, that's when we can say the onboarding step is done. This is from Start Deliver. Here you can see the usage. You can basically see when they actually last was logged in. You can see how many users are active and where are we with these customers. So it's very important to measure it on a customer level. It's also very important, of course, to keep track on this on the project level. How are we managing our projects? Are things moving ahead, or are we actually behind on projects? So you might want to also keep track on how the specific projects are going. Here we have someone that's actually 2 days delayed. We have a canceled one. We have a paused one. Where are we with our onboarding projects? Especially if you have a bigger team and you have a lot of customers onboarding at the same time, you need to keep track of this also to manage your resources. How much time are we spending on these onboardings? So there's a lot to be measured. You can do it quite easily hands-on, but that's really something you need to do if you want to speed up and be more efficient and actually get customers on board faster. So that was idea number 4. The last one coming up. Oh, so this is a big one. Let's make onboarding unboring. Onboarding unboring. It's a tongue twister as well. No, but I think this is a spin to things, but a lot of time the energy, the excitement is very high from the customer's point of view, from our point of view, when they sign the contract. And it's very easy that we kind of lose that energy in the onboarding project. And that's a big danger. And let's look at how we can change that. So the first thing here to make it unboring, to make it more exciting, to make it more fun, is to have this goal top of mind. So back to the number 1 thing here, we need to know what the goal is. And this is actually something you can, even in every meeting, you can open up by talking about the goal. Yeah, maybe just have it there in front of everyone, have it really top of mind. That's a key thing, both to keep the excitement up, and as anyone who's done anything, if it's to climb a mountain or train for something, train for a marathon or whatever, you need to kind of see the goal to keep doing the grinding work that needs to be done to get there. So keep the goal in mind. In some practical things here, you can have it, you can remind everyone of it in the meetings, you can have it in the shared space, you can send out emails around it. Of course, you can also always ask a little bit questions around it to keep that really in the center and not lose sight of that. That's the number 1 thing here. Number 2 here you can be creative. I know everybody's super busy, so people usually kind of don't have time to do this, but is there something we can do that is more than expected? When they sign up with us, they will also get this that they didn't expect. This is the delight, something more than we expect. And you can look for inspiration everywhere. You have the service industry, they do things, but you can also link it more to, of course, you can send out a t-shirt or a sticker or something like that, but you can also do something that's more close to their business. So help them with some templates, help them with some things that are maybe not even used in your product, but that will help them in what they're trying to achieve. So this is where you need to be creative, but do that. It will make the difference. The last part here is also the energy we bring into the project. If we go into the project that this is going to be hard, it's going to take a lot of time, it's data, it's integration, it's heavy, that's going to be the energy that we give the customer as well. So we need to keep the energy up. So remember this, and that will reflect on the customer. So let's also look on how we can managing the onboarding projects, how can we make it more fun from our side? So very small thing, but important thing to bring it home. So that's it. Thanks for joining for today, and hope to see you soon.